Thanks so much for sitting down with us today. I know that the staff and community members are really interested to hear your perspective on how budget cuts from the state might impact our district.
And we know this is certainly important for us to talk about, and we know it's important to all of our employees. And so we want to begin talking about the impact. First thing I want to say is that this is nothing new. The Norman Public Schools, as well as public schools across the state, have faced these budgetary and downturns a number of times. We have in our district, and each time we've worked our way through the process, making sure we keep students as a priority, student services as a priority, and we've always come out stronger and moving forward. This is going to be a significant downturn, a little bit different than we've seen in the past. But I also want to say I think we are in a good financial position to deal with these challenges going forward. But I don't want to underestimate. We do have challenges, like we do across the state. So I want to talk a little bit this afternoon about what some of those challenges are. And then obviously we'll have more discussions as the legislative session goes on and as we move closer to having to make some decisions related to services and how we work in our district.
First, can you provide a brief overview of how our district is actually funded?
So as other districts across the state, we are heavily dependent on state funding. Which is really where the revenue shortfall that we're finding ourselves in is at. It's at the state level. 56%, approximately 56% of our funding comes from state funding. Another percentage of it, and the next largest percentage, comes from local funding and local ad valorem funding. And fortunately, we're in a community that actually helps us in that matter because we are in a growing community, in a community that actually does take its opportunities to support schools. And then we do have significant and important federal funds. Both our local funds and our federal funds, to be honest with you, are have been very stable. And they will be through this crisis. So that's the good news. Our challenge is state funding, and certainly we're a dependent district on state funding.
The education sector has experienced budget cuts before, so why is this year so different?
Well, I think this is different. It's different in two ways. One is very rarely have we had a revenue failure where budgets were reduced in the middle of a school year. So that's the first piece. But the actual shortfall at the state level that's projected for next year of $1.3 billion is probably the highest we've ever seen. That's going to mean probably a larger budget reduction for public education, even if public education becomes a priority for the legislature, as they have talked about in the past. The significance of the budget hole that they're trying to fill will make this very different this year than we've experienced before.
So what do the funding cuts mean specifically for Norman Public Schools?
I want to break that down to the two funding problems we're facing, because to some extent they've been kind of brought together. So we have two issues, and we have an immediate issue, and that's what I want to first address with all of you. The first issue is what's called a revenue failure, and that's what we're experiencing right now, and that's when the state has projected a certain amount of revenue they're going to collect, and through that collections, they assume they're going to make those appropriations to the district. The school district received in July, and then again in December, notices of this is the appropriations you have to function for this 15-16 school year, which we're in now. A revenue failure means the state did not collect enough to actually provide that appropriations. So that's our first challenge, is between January and June 30th of this year, and how are we going to address that issue? The district has already been notified that we will lose about $1 million at this point between January of this year and June 30th. Our expectation, because of continued slow revenue collections at the state level, is that we will see additional reductions probably around March. How much that is, we'll have to wait and see, but we're expecting close to 3%, which would mean probably an additional $900,000. So the first thing we have to do is deal with this, what will probably be close to a $2 million reduction between January and June 30th. The good news for us as a school district is we're prepared to absorb that type of reduction. That's why we have a reserve. That's what it's meant for. It's meant to stabilize the school district during downturns. So clearly, I want to say we won't reduce services to students. This downturn between January and June 30th will not affect employment. We will meet all of our obligations, including health insurance for teachers, as well as for all employees, actually, as well as all the services that we are currently providing our students. And we will manage that during this part of the revenue failure. The next challenge is going forward, and that's where the state legislature has to address this $1.3 billion shortfall. We have yet been to be notified of what impact that will have on the district. But I will say this is we're expecting reductions next year. I don't think that there is a way for the legislature at this point to deal with such a massive shortfall without impacting school districts. Because anytime that we're protected, other important services are reduced further. Things like that we know are important: mental health, Department of Human Services, other entities that work well with us and serve our students also. I expect to see an additional reduction next year. For every percent we're reduced going into the next fiscal year, which will be the 16-17 school year, for each percent we're reduced, that's approximately $450,000 of reduced revenue. We'll have to wait and see what that percentage actually looks like when as the legislature meets this session.
Do you anticipate having to let go of any teachers or administrators or support staff this year or maybe even next year?
For the remainder of this fiscal year, January to June 30th is what we have left in this measure. We will be making no changes in our services to students, in our obligations to staff, support or certified, and the type of and being able to meet all of our obligations related to all of that work. We will watch our budget. I certainly have asked our principals and our directors, people who have budget responsibilities, to be sure that they're cautious on their spending, that we spend our dollars on the things that most directly impact kids, and the needs versus the wants. And we will have to push our wants maybe to a later time. So we're going to be cautious, we're going to be budget conscious, but we're going to meet all our obligations.
The district's already started recruiting teachers for next year, so can you talk a little bit about why that's still important even though we're facing budget shortfalls?
We all know that the most important factor that we have in our districts are our employees, the strength of our employees. We have to be a district that's proactive in recruiting and finding the best and the brightest to come work with you as colleagues and with our students. And it's really important that we stay ahead of that curve. We know that this state is suffering from about 1,000 teacher shortage. That number is only going to increase. Our obligation to you as teachers, and my obligation to our students, and my obligation to the community, is to find ways to recruit and retain the best teachers and staff across the district that we can find. We're going to remain active in that because we know we will have vacancies, and through retirements and resignations, and there are going to be vacancies we have to fill. We have to be ahead of the game, and we're going to be very aggressive about that, even during these downtimes.
So talk to us a little bit about why the district continues to invest in construction projects, the bond project, bricks and mortar, at a time like this.
That's a really good question. Well, first of all, the fact that we have capital dollars and the fact that we live in Norman, where we've had a community that has said yes every time we've asked them to support our schools, is key, and why, if you're going to be in a district during a downturn of revenue and funding, Norman is a community and a district you should want to be in. Our capital investments will allow us to continue moving forward on taking care of our buildings, providing resources, and even really moving some of our instructional programs forward. Because of that revenue, we can continue to be some visionary in the direction we want to go. The only thing that the capital doesn't help us with is being able to invest in personnel the way we would like to. But capital dollars and our ability to fund certain operations of our district through the capital dollars gives us more operational wiggle room in that we can invest in personnel. So these bond dollars, this capital investment dollars, are one of the pieces that put our whole financial, make our financial position as solid as it is.
So can you talk to us a little bit about the rules associated with bond funds and how they can and can't be spent?
Bond funds are specifically, by law, legally available to expend on capital investments in the school district. That's the legal definition. Fortunately, part of that is things like software, things like technology, in fact, things like textbooks.
So what is the district doing to prepare for next year?
Well, obviously, we have to begin prioritizing, and we have to be able to take a wide view of places that we can reduce expenditures and try to match that to the level of reductions we might receive. I've always tended not to overreact to these situations and to let the reality of what the legislature does then drive the decisions we make. But I will say this, there are going to have to be reductions. What those reductions are really will be aligned with the percentage of reduction we see from the state. But we'll set priorities. And the priorities will be classrooms and classroom teachers. The priorities will be maintaining programs that we know are effective for kids. And the reason I say that is there are times where districts go in and they cut entire programs. And in all honesty, my belief is those programs are very hard to bring back when the inevitable of revenue restoration comes along. And so we're going to protect programs. We're going to protect services to students. And we're going to make classrooms a priority. We'll have to look at all the other aspects of the district to find those budget reductions we have to make, but that will be totally based on the amount of reductions we see. Again, we go into this reduction period in, I think, as stable of a condition as we possibly could under the circumstances. That will give us the opportunity to really analyze what are the things that will impact students and student success least. And that's the area, and that's where we'll begin.
So what advice do you have for our staff, our parents, our community members who might be interested in how these budget reductions may impact the quality of education that our students receive?
I think we have to advocate, and we have to talk with our parents, and we have to talk to our families about what this continued downturn of funding of public education means, what it means in Norman and what it means across the state. There are things that our state legislature can do and should do as we move forward that we're encouraging them to do. I'm going to give you one example of something that I think is really immediate that could help school districts. Just like the Norman Public Schools has a fund balance, a reserve for emergencies, the state legislature has a reserve and a fund balance for emergencies. It's called the Rainy Day Fund. It has about $358 million in it. As a superintendent, I would encourage our legislature to really consider tapping into that Rainy Day Fund this semester to help restore some of the funding they're already obligated to. That will put districts in a position going forward, a stronger position going forward to absorb cuts for next year. So that's one thing. But the other thing I would encourage teachers to talk about and look at is the reality is we have a $1.3 billion shortfall, budget hole. It's not going to be fixed in 1 year. It's not going to be fixed in one session. But what we should expect from our legislators and what we should be talking about as educators is once the price of oil and all these variables come back, what is the legislature's plan so we never end up in this position again? And I think as educators, we're realistic people. We understand that everything can't be fixed in one legislative session. But what we should expect is what's the 2-year plan, what's the 5-year plan, what's the 10-year plan to assure that public education receives the funding that it needs to be successful, and so that we can provide our students with their best opportunity for success. And so I think there's some immediate things that we need to do, and the legislature needs to react to those things. But I think more importantly for the future, and what we should be advocating for is we expect a plan going forward so that we're not here again in another 5 years or another 10 years, or the next time there's a downturn in oil and gas. Our kids can't be held hostage to other industries and the ups and downs of those industries. And our legislature has to really create a plan to assure that that doesn't happen again.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I'd like to just assure our community, and I know our staff knows this, we're going to do everything that we have always done as educators in this district to serve our students and our community. But I would ask is that as community members who we know in Norman value their public schools, that they pay attention to what's going on and make their voice heard about how important public education is to them personally, to our community as a whole, and more importantly to our state. This is the time that legislators need to hear from parents, teachers, students, that with all of the needs of our state, public education always has to remain a priority.